Hey, Malia. All right. Well, it's about ready to rain here, so it just got really, really dark, and it may get darker still. We are going to do or pick up our discussion from last week on the yoga of Jesus. Last week, if you didn't see it and you're interested in it, you can, I'm sure, go down the scroll down my timeline, or you could just, I guess, search for yoga of Jesus, and I'm sure the video will pop right up. And I talked a lot about that word repent and how it doesn't mean what we think it means. It doesn't mean be bad, you're bad, be good. It doesn't mean you're messed up. Try not to be messed up anymore. But it's akin to the Buddhist idea of in the first rungs of the Eightfold Path, usually translated as right understanding or right seeing. Of course, that word right doesn't mean right or wrong. Right isn't right or wrong or correct in the sense of moralness, moral correctness, but it's like perfect vision, seeing things as it is, and and so the whole sort of call to repentance by Jesus and John the Baptist, but Jesus, once he is baptized, goes out into the wilderness and starts his ministry, the first thing he talks about is that sort of looking at things differently, acquiring perfect vision, because as with the Buddhist tradition, you cannot do the path of transformation unless you have some of the perfect vision. You have to see things as they are before you can begin to be transformed to conform with how things are. Right? You have to know you're a prisoner before you can escape from prison. You have to see that you're locked up. You can see how the world isn't a jail and that you are in jail. And when you see the freedom, you can begin to move towards that freedom, right? So and the other thing about perfect vision is it isn't like once you get perfect vision, you have perfect vision all the time. I have no doubt that maybe the Buddha, after he was enlightened, of course, had 24 hours, 7 day a week, 52 weeks a year perfect vision. I have no doubt that Jesus had permanent, lasting, perfect vision. But the rest of us, until we get that point where we're either enlightened or the kingdom of God is manifest fully in us, whatever phrase we want to use, are going to have glimpses of perfect vision. So we're going to have perfect glimpses. It isn't necessarily a perfect vision as if it's sustained vision, but we're going to get glimpses where we see things as they are. If I may quote pop culture, we will see the glitches in the matrix, right? And see what's really going on there. We will see through the cracks and see what's happening. So that's what all the last week was about. This week we're going to start into the Sermon on the Mount. And before we get into the sermon, and I'm actually going to use a real translation, not just my translation, so you don't hear the crazy translation from RJ. You'll hear the regular translation. But I'm going to say that the Sermon on the Mount, and I say this a lot, and I know I said it yesterday in a different video, I think the one on the Dhammapada, where I was reading the Dhammapada of the Buddha. Jesus nowhere preaches himself in the Sermon on the Mount. Actually, in the Synoptic Gospels, he doesn't preach himself at all. The focus of his ministry isn't him. I know that's weird for a lot of Christians. I know I just made a lot of people angry. But what about John's Gospel, where he says, well, that's John's Gospel, and we'll tackle that when we get to John's Gospel, because I can explain that stuff too. But Jesus isn't preaching himself. He's preaching this thing called the kingdom of God. And he's also going to tell us that the kingdom of God is within us. So whatever we're looking for is already there. It's hiding in the one place we never thought to look. We look in outer space, we look on the highest mountains, we look in the deepest depths of the sea, we look in riches, we look in other people, we look to find this thing we're looking for, but we can never find it. Why? Because God hid it in here. And all we have to do is look within and we will find the treasure we've been looking for our whole lives, or many, many lives maybe. So Jesus doesn't preach himself. The Sermon on the Mount does not tell us what to believe. There's nothing in the Sermon on the Mount that says you must believe this or you must believe that. It's a description of behavior, how to behave. It's a teaching of how disciples should behave, or how those who claim to be Christian or those who claim to be saved should behave. So again, all that I'm going to say without all the commentary. I'm just going to say it simply this time. The Sermon on the Mount, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus does not preach himself. He does not preach what to believe. He teaches how to behave and interact with others, how to sort of behave and interact with God, how to behave and interact with yourself. That's basically it, right? So it's behavior driven. And I know there's a lot of Christians who are like, well, I don't know. There's a lot of Christians seem to think that behavior doesn't matter because we're saved by grace and Jesus did it for us. So therefore, it really doesn't matter how I behave. And that's just nonsense. That's just nonsense. That's just a rationalization to get out of living the way you're supposed to live. Because I got to tell you, here's the thing about belief. Belief affects behavior. If it doesn't change your behavior, you don't believe it. It's a concept. The difference between a concept and a belief is that a concept is an idea you can just have in your head and it doesn't really change anything. It's just an idea. And you can believe that concept is true, but it doesn't change anything. It doesn't affect how you live. Like 2 plus 2 equals 4 is a concept that's in my head right now. It's not really changing how I'm doing anything. Now, I guess if I were designing a building or something, maybe that's important. But right now, 2 plus 2 equals 4 is a concept. I believe it's true, but it really doesn't change anything. It doesn't change anything in this video. It doesn't change anything with these birds out there. It doesn't change anything. But a belief affects how I behave. If I believe that if I believe in gravity and I believe gravity is real and I believe that the result of that means if I jump off the roof I'm going to fall down and hurt myself, that affects how I behave. I'm not going to go out on the roof trying to fly because I believe in gravity. I believe I will fall. So it's different from a concept. The concept would be, yeah, I have this concept that if I run off the roof, I may fall, but I may not. Well, who cares? Let's give it a try, see what happens. No, I believe I'll fall and I'll crash with a mighty crash, and and hurt myself in the process. So therefore, I do not do that. So that's the difference between belief and concept. And so, if you believe in Jesus, if you believe all this stuff is true, then it should be affecting your behavior. And I'm going to say this now, because even though I was intending to say it later, this is unrehearsed and unscripted, so it's how it pops in my head. But I was planning on saying this later after I talked a little bit about the yamas and the 10 perfections and such of the Buddha, is that, look, I agree with a lot of Christians who say what we do can't save us, right? Whatever that may mean to you, salvation may mean to you. What I do can't save me, right? I can't earn my salvation through what I do. But what I do matters because if I'm saved, it's going to affect what I do. So what's going on in the Sermon on the Mount, just like it's what's going on in these other things I'm going to reference in a few minutes, is that, all right, this stuff that we're going to hear about today may not save you, but if you're not doing it, you may not be saved. Because this is a description of how saved people behave. Just like when the yamas I'm going to talk about and the 10 perfections and the 5 precepts of the Buddha are not how do you work your way to enlightenment, but they're statements of this is how enlightened beings behave. If you're not behaving this way, you're probably not enlightened. If you're not behaving this way, you're probably not saved. You can do the sinner's prayer. You can rely on the grace of Jesus. You can do all that stuff you say about, but if it's not changing your behavior, you don't believe it. And we are saved by grace through faith. And if your faith isn't changing your behavior, then I don't know what it is. It's a concept. We're not saved by grace through concepts, right? We're saved by grace through faith, through our belief, through this thing that we trust in that determines how we behave. All right, that was a long introduction and turned into a sermon, but I'm sticking with it. Chai tea, by the way, in case you care. All right, so before we get into the Sermon on the Mount proper, I just want to introduce you to, first, we'll go in terms, I guess, history. Yoga being older, the yoga systems being older, and this is a part of, there's this book called the Yoga Sutras, which again, I didn't explain yoga last week either. I sort of said what it isn't. So I'm just going to say this. Yoga just means union. It's sort of like our word yoke, which we don't use anymore because a lot of us don't have oxen to plow our fields. But Jesus references yoke in chapter 11 of Matthew, for instance. But the yoke is how you would hook up the oxen to your wagon and it all became one thing, or the oxen to the plow and it all became one thing to plow, right? So yoke means, or yoga means union. It means yoke, it's union. And so you can think of that union as however you want to. Union with God, union with Christ, union with consciousness or Brahman or whatever it is, or based on the conversation of the video from last week where I was talking about the nous and the psyche and how were estranged, and the goal is to sort of rest the psyche into the nous, to rest the mind in the heart. You can say that yoga is the union of the mind and the heart, so that we don't just live in our heads and do all the stuff we do in our heads, which causes a lot of problem, but we rest our heads in our hearts, which creates peace and pure thoughts and so on. So whatever you want to think of that union, that's what it means. It just means union. And so as part of, and sutra, by the way, is like we have this word in English, if you, especially if you're in the medical field, when they use stitches, they're called sutras, right? I'm sorry, sutures. Sutures are threads that we use to stitch up, like say someone who's been cut or after an operation, right? Sutures. Well, that's the same word as sutra, or similar to the Sanskrit word sutra. So it's yoga threads, or threads of union. I like to call it my translation of Yoga Sutra as a title is just sort of stitching together union with God, or stitching together union with Christ, or have whatever that thing we want to be unified with. So that's what yoga is, and that's what we're talking about. We say the yoga of Jesus is this teaching of Jesus that stitches together our relationship with Him, or our relationship with God, or our relationship with ourselves, or our relationship with others, or our relationship with all the above, because I think it's more all the above, right? So in the yoga tradition, there are in this book called the Yoga Sutras, which is a sort of systemized 196 sutras, sort of explaining the yogic process. There is this part. There are these 5 yamas, and yamas are sort of like these just sort of behave. Let's just say they're behaviors, right? 5 ethical ways of behaving, and the first yama is always listed is ahimsa, and ahimsa. If you know Greek, Sanskrit works for you on this, because in Greek you have a word like gnosko, which means knowledge. But if you put the alpha in front of it and make it agnosko, it means a lack of knowledge, or one who does not know, or ignorant, right? Where we get the word agnostic from. So if you put the in front of a word, you're sort of negating the word or making it its opposite. And that's what happens in Sanskrit too. So we have himsa, which means pushing or force. And so the yama is ahimsa, which is not pushing, non-forceful, not harming. It's usually just translated as non-violence, but I think we've all had situations in our lives where we weren't necessarily violent, but we weren't practicing ahimsa, right? Like passive aggressive statement, an angry statement may not be violence, and I'm physically harming somebody, but I'm emotionally harming someone, right? By my words, or by my thoughts, or by my behaviors. I can still harm someone without employing violence. So it isn't just simply non-violence; it's non-harming, non-pushing against. The Taoist in me likes that, non-pushing against, because you don't force in Taoism. You let it sort of be, and you're like water. You flow around the rock. You don't try and force the rock. You find a way to flow around the rock, and over time wear the rock away, because that's how water works. So you have ahimsa, could be non-violence, non-harming, non-forcing, and we're going to see this in the Sermon on the Mount. This is why I'm mentioning this. There is satya. Oop, I lost my screen. There is satya, which is like, let's just say, honesty or truthfulness. Again, and of course, it's not brutal honesty. It's sort of ahimsa honesty. It's honesty that does not harm. So it isn't like, does this dress make my butt look big? And your honest response is, no, the dress is fine. Your butt is just big. that may be honest, but it may not be in keeping with satya, right? It may not be in keeping with this sort of, it's a benevolent honesty, right? It's honesty that helps, not honesty that sort of harms, or honesty that may make you feel better in the moment. There is asteya, which is, non-stealing, sort of. Let's just go with non-stealing. Don't take what's not yours. Brahmacharya, which is often translated uh, as like celibacy. So brahmacharya is often thought of as celibacy by a lot of people, but it has the word Brahma, and so it's sort of, and the group I was hanging out with really likes the sense of more. It's not just not having sex. It's the sense of recognizing the existence of God or Brahma or whatever that word you like is in all things, and sort of being ever presently aware of the presence of the divine in all times and all places. And of course, that is going to affect how you have relationships, sexual and otherwise. So you could also sort of lasso that into not just being celibacy or not having or abstaining from sex, but brahmacharya could we can look at it as sort of being, I can't even think of a good word for it, like sexual purity, not even sexual purity, but sort of right intention with sex, right? It's sort of, we're going to figure out a sort of the proper, having sex in the proper context, in the proper way, with a proper sort of intention. Not just, I'm doing it because I want to feel good and I don't care about you. That's not brahmacharya. And then there's this last one that I hear translated as, you don't give, you don't receive. Aparigrapha. I'd totally butcher that word. Aparigrapha. I'm sorry, I want to make it Greek. I want to make it grapha. Aparigraha. Aparigraha. Anyway, but I think we can just get away saying simplicity and generosity. We're just keeping it simple and being generous with whatever we do have. So that's the yoga sort of five yamas. There's also five niyamas I'm not going to go into right now, but the five yamas, the five sort of ethical ways to behave: non-harming, honest, non-stealing, generous and simple, and having sort of good intentions in your relationships, right? Even your sexual relationships. And then and I'm saying all this because this is going to pop up in the Sermon on the Mount. These ideas are there, and if I see them, I'm going to point them out. But these are there in the Sermon on the Mount, and the yoga systems predate Jesus by they've been doing this stuff for thousands and thousands of years, so it predates Jesus. So it isn't like it's Jesus had this original good idea. It's Jesus is in keeping with these other cultures that have good ideas. And if those of you believe that Jesus went to India, maybe he picked the stuff up in India along the way. Or Jesus went off and became a Buddhist, maybe he picked the stuff up from Buddhism along the way. I don't know. I don't care. I have no opinion on that. I just know that what Jesus is teaching is in keeping with the five yamas. And what Jesus teaches in the Sermon on the Mount is in keeping with the five yamas. And then, if we jump over to Buddhism real quick, just to complicate things, because you know me, I like complicating simple things. I'm going to give you 15 things because I'm going to give you the five precepts and the 10 perfections, right? And so the five precepts are, see if this one sounds familiar, it's actually ahimsa. But in the Buddha sense, it's sort of the sense of abstaining from killing. We're not harming anything, and we're not killing anything. And doesn't just mean you don't kill people, you don't kill anything. No animals for food, things like that. Now there are Buddhists who aren't vegetarian, of course, but this is in keeping with the ahimsa of Buddhism. It's the non-killing. Thou shalt not kill. Not thou shalt not murder in the sense that it only applies to humans if you're not in war or whatever. It's thou shalt not kill, period. We're not going to qualify it. The second precept is for the non-stealing part, the satya. I'm sorry, for the asteya, for not stealing in Buddhism is not just not stealing, but it's not taking what isn't given to you. So if something's just laying there on the ground, or I don't know, someone gets up and they leave their wallet on the table. You think, oh, they left their wallet. It's mine now. Well, they didn't give you the wallet. It's not yours. So it isn't just not stealing. It's don't take what isn't given to you. So, and that clears up a lot of, a lot of the gray areas of, is it wrong to do this? Well, was it given to you? No, it's not yours. Don't take it. Abstaining from sexual misconduct. Maybe misconduct was the word I was looking for. I was in my old tradition of purity, which I don't really like as a word, and this is the only thing I could think of. Sexual misconduct. And so Jesus is going to talk about in the Sermon on the Mount, he's going to talk about lust, and he's going to talk about adultery, right? And he's going to talk about divorce. And these may, even the divorce one, believe it or not, may have to do with sexual misconduct. And we'll explain that as we go along too. Abstaining from lying, of course, you have to be honest, but again, your honesty can't be hurtful or brutal. It has to be loving and helpful in some way. And the last precept of Buddhism, of the 5 precepts, is non-intoxicants. So you don't take things that are going to alter your perception. You like to say mood that aren't mood enhancing, but everything's mood enhancing. You're hungry and you need a good meal that enhances your mood, right? So everything's mood enhancing. This tea is mood enhancing. And some traditions would consider this tea, because it has caffeine, as being an intoxicant. It is an intoxicant, and I shouldn't be drinking it. But I'm not that austere in my practices, right? Tea is okay with me, and if God has a problem with it, we'll work it out. But definitely the ones for the Buddha would be sort of alcohol, and in our times, whatever, drugs. I'm not even going to say illicit or illegal drugs, because even there are a lot of drugs that are legal. Alcohol is a legal drug. No alcohol, it's an intoxicant. No pot, it's an intoxicant. No heroin, it's an intoxicant. I don't care if it's legal or not. And I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying that's how you should, accept it. I'm just saying this is what the Buddha teaches in these 5 precepts. And these are all going to be found in the Sermon on the Mount. I don't know about the intoxicant one. I have to reevaluate that one, but it's going to pop up somewhere, I'm sure. And then, because I'm going way, way too long in this sort of introductory part, the 10 perfections are simply generosity. We're going to see this in the Sermon on the Mount. What is often translated as virtue, but virtue is sort of a virtuous person is non-threatening in word and deed, speaks the truth, and behaves in ways that are truly harmless. Treating others kindly is an act of generosity. So there's generosity, there's sort of virtue, there's renunciation, being willing to have less so that others can have more. There is wisdom. And wisdom, I'm going to read this little paragraph here because I think it's going to explain it better than I can. With the perfection of wisdom, we can discern. Discern is a big word among a lot of Christians who read the New Testament, discernment. The perfection of wisdom we can discern, that is to see and understand what is just enough, what is virtuous, what is skillful. I like that word skillful, by the way, because in Buddhism, they don't really talk about things being good or bad or positive and negative, but as skillful or not skillful, right? So being what we would generally consider as being a bad or a negative or whatever sort of behavior, the Buddhists just say that's not a skillful behavior. It's an unskillful behavior. When I get angry and have a temper tantrum and I'm breaking things, I'm behaving unskillfully. When I sort of find a way to be peaceful and let it sort of pass and I move on, I'm being skillful. So it's not about good or bad, it's about skill and not being skillful. So back to wisdom. With wisdom, we can understand what is harmful and beneficial to ourselves and others. We can understand how greed, hatred, and delusion are the sources of suffering. Energy is another of the perfections. I think energy is better, like it's persistence. So it's persistence, and we're going to see that in the Sermon on the Mount. Those keep seeking and you will find, because that's actually what it means in the Greek. It doesn't mean those seek, it means keep seeking and you will find, keep asking and you will receive, keep knocking and the door will be open. Persistence. There is patience, and patience is huge in the New Testament. It's usually patient endurance is what the word for patience in the New Testament means, but that's going to be in the sermon and other places in the New Testament, especially in the Gospel of Jesus, in the Yoga of Jesus. Truthfulness, resolution. And resolution is sort of, I think would be better sort of like commitment. We're being committed to living in the Buddhist sense, living the five precepts and the 10 perfections, or in the Christian sense, it's that commitment of living the teachings of Jesus that we're going to learn about in the Sermon on the Mount. There's loving kindness, and there's equanimity. And we're going to hear a lot about equanimity by Jesus too in the Sermon on the Mount, treating all people the same. That's how we are perfect, he's going to say. He's going to talk about God treats all people the same, whether they're good or bad. The same rain falls on the good as it does on the bad. And so then he sums it up by saying, so be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. But the context of that is be perfect like your Father in heaven is perfect by treating everything the same and everyone the same, regardless of whether you determine they're good or bad. Treat everyone the same. Equanimity. Don't think some things are good and some things are bad. Don't react certain ways to good people, certain ways to bad people. Whatever but be equal. Have equanimity. So those are the 10 perfections: generosity, virtue, renunciation, wisdom, energy or persistence, patience, truthfulness, commitment, loving kindness, and equanimity. And we're going to see all these sooner or later in the Sermon on the Mount. Now, I'm not going to do the whole sermon today because it's 3 chapters of the New Testament, but I am going to begin with the sermon at chapter 5. So if you're following along in your Bible, you can open up to chapter 5, because don't believe what I say. Believe for yourself. Don't listen to me tell you how mashed potatoes taste, but get out the bowl of mashed potatoes yourself and get a big old spoonful. Make sure I'm describing it accurately, all right? All right, so chapter 5 in Matthew. That's the first book of the New Testament. So go to where the New Testament begins. Open up to Matthew and then turn a couple pages. You'll be at chapter 5. And we will... And, oh, I just closed it. Dag nabbit. Scatchamagalza. All right, so let me find it again. This is why I prefer using my Kindle for everything, because things like this doesn't happen. All right, things like this don't happen. I've only been speaking English for like 50 years. You'd think I'd be good at it by now. All right, so chapter 5, we'll just begin at the beginning. One day he saw the crowds, he being Jesus. He saw the crowds. That's not... All right, in the Greek, I'm just going to read it straight from the Greek right here. Seeing the crowds, he went up the mountain. And when he sat down, his disciples came to him. All right? I don't know. For some reason, that sentence just bugged me the way they had it. But it's basically the same thing. So one day, as he saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up the mountainside, and sat down. Incidentally, Jesus is sitting down. I know in all the movies, when he does the Sermon on the Mount, he's walking around the crowds. But in this time period, if a rabbi taught, like a rabbi would run around and teach, and what they were saying may or may not be important. They would give teachings as they were going hither and thither. But if they stopped and sat down to teach, it was like, ooh, pay attention. Take notes, because this is about important. If they stopped and sat down and taught, it was going to be the important stuff. So the fact that it mentions Jesus sitting down is not just some quirky little piece of narrative. It's making the point that, Jesus saw the crowds. He went up this mountain, like Moses, right, to get the law. Jesus goes up the mountain to give the law, and he sits down because what he says, what he's going to say, this is some serious stuff here. So pay attention and take notes. That's what sitting down means. And he began to teach them. It's actually better in the Greek. He opened his mouth, and these are the words that he taught, is something like that. These are the words he taught them. It's much more wordy. And then this translation says, God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him. Going back to the Greek. Makarioi, sorry, I can do this when I'm not on camera. Makarioi, 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 hoi patokoi to panumati. Makarioi, Makarios. I know how to say this word. I have a condition, and sometimes it makes me sort of slur my words. It's sort of hard to sort of be able to, even though I know the word, it's hard to sort of do it. And knowing it and trying to say it even harder seems to make it worse. And so I have to just relax and try not to say it, but it's hard for me to do that or to remember to do that. So Makarioi is the plural of Makarios, and Makarios means blessed. And a lot of modern translations render this word as happy, which I do not like. Not just because like I'm old school and I want the old school way of doing things, but I think happy is a bad translation of Makarioi or Makarios, because blessed is a state of being. Happiness is a state of the moment, right? Happiness is transient. Happiness is conditional. Makarios is a state of being. It is not transitional. It is not dependent on anything. So I think if we were going to use a word, we wouldn't use happiness, we would use joy. And I know this is going to sound weird to a lot of people, but joy is not happiness. Happiness is not joy. Joy is somehow abiding. It stays with us. It becomes a permanent residence, versus happiness is, oh, it's not raining, I'm happy. Oh, it started raining, I'm not so happy anymore. Happiness comes and goes. Happiness is conditional. Joy is not conditional. Joy exists regardless of the conditions, and blessing exists regardless of the conditions. So what is this blessing? Blessing is sort of good favor, good fortune. For those of us in the theistic tradition, it is a supernatural divine favor. And Makarios or Makarioi, the blessed ones, literally what it says, the blessed ones, spiritual beggars. Spiritual beggars are the blessed ones. We have to supply the verb in this one. So those who are spiritual beggars are blessed, or blessed are the spiritual beggars, because that's what patokoi means. It doesn't just mean poor, like, gee, I'm going to have a hard time paying my electric bill, I can pay the gas bill, or I can pay, the phone bill, but I can't pay both. So I'm going to pay this bill this month and then pay the other bill next month and whatever. All right, that's poor. But that's not what patokoi is. Patokoi is you're missing something that's crucial to your survival. So you are like, it's the destitute. Blessed are the destitute and the spiritually destitute. And I think the word is actually akin to those who went around begging. So it's blessed are the spiritual beggars. Well, what's a spiritual beggar? A spiritual beggar, and there's been a lot of people who spent a lot of pages over the last 2,000 years trying to figure out what the spiritual beggars means, what it means to be spiritually poor, the poor in spirit, ranging from simply just being humble, ranging to sort of becoming poor yourself, ranging to, all right, even if I have stuff, I can still sort of identify with the poor and be motivated for the care of the poor, that the stuff I have is going towards the poor. I'm poor in spirit, even though I may be rich in material, I'm still poor in spirit, so I know that none of this stuff is mine, right? There's all kinds of ways to look at that, and I'm sorry to go off on this whole big sermon on that. So we'll move on. Blessed are the poor in spirit, and then what it says is, because to them is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed, and so it's traditionally because the kingdom of heaven is theirs, or the kingdom of heaven belongs to them. This translation says, God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. So yeah, the poor know that they need help to survive, and in this case, it's the spiritually, the spiritual beggars are those who are begging God, like they're relying on God for their sustenance, because they ain't getting it anywhere else. Screen went blank. All right. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Oh, and the reason why we're doing this beatitude part, this is what this means is beatitude comes from like the Latin for blessing. These blessings are, I'm making this case. And I'm going to make this case by appealing to another work that I like a lot, The Rule of St. Benedict. And in The Rule of St. Benedict, if you ever read a commentary, if you were to get 10 commentaries on The Rule of St. Benedict, they would all begin the same way, talking about how the first word of the Rule of St. Benedict is listen. And then they would write, sermons on what it means to listen and what Benedict meant by listen. It actually says, listen with the ear of your heart, which is this great phrase. But it's listen. And so people find meaning that the first word is listen. Now, I say all that to say this. The first word Jesus utters. Now, granted, in the last chapter, he's talking about that sort of need for perfect vision, right? That need to see things as they really are. But now here he is gathered with his disciples, and he's sitting down to give them the important stuff, and he's teaching them, and the very first word he says is blessed. Blessed. And then it's blessed are the spiritual beggars, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are those who are humble, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness or for justice. Blessed is the first word, and that means something. First words matter, right? And so you can look at it one of two ways. You can say that, oh, this blessedness is sort of if these people are blessed, if, like, say, the poor in spirit are blessed, or those who mourn are blessed, or those who are humble or meek are blessed, then I can be humble and meek, and therefore I will become blessed, or I can become poor in spirit, and I will become blessed. So you can try and look at it, you can look at it that way, and I think that's how a lot of people do look at it, and I think it's also why no one seems to follow through on any of this. Or you can look at it this way. I think what's being said here is your default setting, your natural state is that of being blessed. And even though you may not feel that way right now because you're caught up in a lot of bull stuff, I'm trying to keep it rated G, but if I were just talking to you here in private, I would use the full words of BS. You're caught up in all this bull stuff with your job and maybe in your relationships or maybe with your kids or maybe with this or maybe with that. I just had this with my own job where I'm doing 2 full-time jobs at once. I come home, my dogs are peeing and pooping inside my house. I somehow owe all this money for taxes, even though whatever. And it just, I got to tell you, I did not feel very blessed in those moments, right? But your default setting, your default state, your natural state, let's put it that way, your natural state is to be blessed. And these are the ways that those who remember that they are blessed are. So it isn't like, oh, if I become poor in spirit, then I'll be blessed. No, it's because you are blessed. When you can remember that, being poor in spirit happens. When you are blessed, mourning happens. And not mourning in the sense of, it isn't just as simple as, although it does not deny sort of the sense like, hey, we lost someone we love, like my mother died and I'm mourning. Now that can be included in this, and of course I use this in a lot of funerals when I do funerals. But it's sort of what the sense is in sort of the big picture stuff. It's not just mourning for the people that are important to us, or mourning the loss of a pet. I lost a pet in December, and I mourned a little bit because grief is natural and mourning is how we get it out, right? So it happens. But it's mourning for sort of the state of the world. So those of us who wake up those of us who have a hard time turning on the news because all it does is create profound grief when we see how people are behaving. When we turn on the news and we see what's going on in Ukraine because one guy decided that he needs to invade and all these lives are being affected and all these people are dying and the war is against civilians and not against soldiers. Blessed are the people who mourn that, people who see the inherent sadness in that and feel it viscerally. Or when I turn on the news and I see, you know, like how people in Congress are behaving, and I'm not picking sides on one side or the other because they both make me sad right now. uh, when I see how politicians are behaving, and how they treat each other, and how they want to treat other people in the name of what they call is good, but is only for their own limited sense of short-sighted power and privilege, uh, those of us it makes some of us mourn. And so when those of us who are blessed, when we see people behaving in a non-blessed way, or again, to steal from the Buddhist language, people behaving in an unskilled manner because they are behaving in ways that hurt people for no reason other than, I guess, they think they're getting something out of it. Those who are blessed mourn. So again, I'm saying all this again to say being blessed is our default setting. It is our natural state. And those who and we forget it. The problem is we forget that we're blessed, and when we forget that, we may behave in ways. We may not behave poor in spirit. We may behave like arrogant rich jerks. We may not be mourning. We may be behaving like people. Get over it. You got to move on. We may not be humble, or we may not be meek is the traditional word. We may be aggressive, right? But those who remember that they're blessed, remember that their natural state is being blessed, find it easier to be poor in spirit, find it easier to see the world and experience sadness and grief for how people are behaving and how just people hurt each other for sport. Those who see people being aggressive, they find it easier to be meek and humble. Gentle, I think, would be the best word. Just do things, again, like water. Water does not force, it does not insist, it flows around the rock. It carves deep canyons by simply flowing. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst. Traditionally, it's for righteousness. I don't like that word righteousness because we've made it moral. Justice is the root. Dikaya is the word for justice, and dikayasune is the word for righteousness. Yes, I am a nerd. I know these words off the top of my head. Dikayasune is the word that's often translated righteousness, but justice is the root of that. And so, regardless of what we want to make justice or whatever, what it comes down to is being in a right relationship. Justice in the Bible is about relationship. It's not about punishment. We often use justice as punishment, but justice is being in a right relationship. So the idea of an eye for an eye, for instance, wasn't to punish someone. You poke out my eye, now I get to punish you by poking out your eye. It was a way to restore the balance. It means I can't chop off your head if you poke out my eye. That does not restore the balance. It exacerbates it. It escalates the violence, right? So an eye for an eye was originally a way to stop the escalation of violence by restoring a balance. All right, you poked out my eye, I poke out your eye. Balance restored, right? So that's what justice is, a sense of balance, a right relationship. And in the Bible, it extends in four directions. We have a right relationship with God. We have a right relationship with others. We have a right relationship with ourselves, and we have a right relationship with creation. And all those things have to be in a right relationship together, like a mobile, because if any part of that gets unbalanced, the whole thing sort of collapses. So we have to make sure our relationship with God is right, our relationship with others is right, our relationship with ourselves is right, and our relationship with creation is right. And that is all in blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst to be in a right relationship with God and others and themselves and creation. If you're hungry for that, well, you'll be satisfied. Blessed are those who are merciful, because they will be shown mercy. Blessed are those whose hearts are pure, Really, what that word means in the Greek is single-mindedly devoted, single-minded devotion to God. Blessed are those who have single-minded devotion to God, for they will see God. Blessed are those who work for peace. Blessed are the peacemakers, is traditional. Blessed are those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. And again, the word for peace, again, peace just doesn't mean an absence of conflict. For instance, right now, we may not be at war with Russia, but we are certainly not at peace with Russia, right? There is no conflict, there is no war. So peace isn't just not no conflict. You can live in a home where there may be peace, where people aren't arguing or fighting or hitting each other, but it's tense the whole time you're there, right? And so that's not peace. Peace is actually, in the Hebrew it's shalom, in the Greek it's iona, or ione, and it's that sense of nothing lacking, nothing missing, completeness, well-being. So we can say, blessed are the peacemakers, as blessed are those who work for the well-being of others. Those blessed are those who work to make sure people aren't lacking anything they need. Blessed are those who make sure nothing is missing, that work for wholeness and well-being. They shall be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And blessed are you when you are being mocked and persecuted and lied about, and they say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. Remember, it's Jesus talking. Be happy about it. I think the best way of saying is be ecstatic about it. Not just be happy, but cheer. I know it's crazy, right? People are picking on you. Cheer. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. You're in good company, he's saying. All right. So all that doesn't really instruct us. I mean, it does, but it doesn't instruct us how to behave. That part's coming up in a few minutes, but it does deal with sort of the takeaway from all that is, hey, your natural state is being blessed. That's your natural state, is that of blessedness. And as a being whose natural state is blessed, if you can remember that, then these other qualities will manifest. You will manifest this, whatever you want to understand, poor in spirit is. You will manifest sort of sympathy and compassion and hurt for the world as it treats itself badly. You will manifest this hunger to be in a right relationship with God and yourself and others. You will manifest meekness. You will manifest mercy. You will manifest a desire to help people get what they need to restore wholeness and well-being. These things will flow from you when you remember and abide in the fact that you are blessed. Okay? So the very first thing Jesus teaches in his yoga is you're blessed, and this is what blessing looks like. Not that this is what you're going to get for yourself, but this is what's going to exude from you when you come to live in a very real sense of your blessing. And it just doesn't happen by saying, oh, I'm blessed. We sort of have to dwell in it. I mean, that's sort of what we may do in those of us who sit in meditation may sit and meditate, just sort of not with words in our mind, but find a way to feel the blessing so that all these things begin to flow in our lives. So we begin the yoga of Jesus proper with the understanding that our natural state is that of being blessed. And as people who are blessed, these things begin to manifest themselves in our lives. All right, that was a long way to get around to that nice, short, simple statement at the end. All right, Jesus continues. I know this is going to be a long video, but I'm going to get to the end of the chapter. Maybe I have less to say as we move on. So you are the salt of the earth, but what good is salt if it loses its flavor? Can you make it salty again? It will be thrown out and trampled underfoot and worthless. You are the light of the world. Notice Jesus isn't saying, I'm the salt of the earth. He's saying, you are the salt of the earth. All of you, by the way, is plural. All y'all are the salt of the earth. and all y'all are the light of the world. Like a city on the hilltop cannot be hidden, no one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that people will praise your Father in heaven. So people will see it and praise your Father in heaven. And again, I think this is flowing out from where we just were. Your natural state, your default state is being blessed. These things are part of what it means to be blessed, will manifest from you, and don't try and keep them a secret. Once your meekness starts flowing, once your desire to help others starts flowing, once your hunger and thirst to be in the right relationship with others start flowing, don't hide it. Don't try and kill it, but let it flow, baby. Let it flow. And others will see that, and they will be not impressed with you, and don't let them be impressed with you, because it's not about you, but they'll be impressed with God or the divine or whatever it is that is that piece of the truth, because you had some true vision, and part of your true vision is seeing that you are blessed at all times, and remembering that creates these things that manifest in your life that result in you being the salt of the earth. You're going to have flavor. You're going to be salty. You're going to be flavorful. Plus, salt was used as a preservative, so it wasn't just something that gave food flavor, made it more enjoyable, but it was something that preserved food. So you're preserving people and things. You're a preservative, a natural preservative, not one that's going to cause high blood pressure and heart attacks. And you are the light of the world. I know we always think of Jesus in John where he says, "I am the light of the world," but he's saying y'all are the light of the world. Deal with it. All right. And then we're going to get to the part about, there's a section here. Yesterday I read from the Dhammapada in another video, and it begins with, the Dhammapada of the Buddha begins with this first part that's called the two verses. And where it gets its name from is that the Buddha kind of gives like this contrast. He gives in one verse a contrast one way, and then in the second verse gives like its opposite. And it's sort of, oh, so my hands are out of screen. So it's one way and then the opposite. And it usually begins with the negative and then moves to the positive, or the unskillful to the skillful, or the way of the world to the way of truth, right? So he's going to say, people who hate, this is what happens. People who have bad thoughts, this is what happens. But people who have good thoughts, this is what happens. So it's the dual verses, or the twin verses. We're going to get like that right now, where Jesus is going to quote the Hebrew Torah. You have heard it said, but now I tell you. You're going to get like a twin verse thing going on here, like the Buddha did in the Dhammapada, the first part of his sort of Sermon on the Mount, or like I like to think of it as Buddha Sermon on the Mount, right? So here we go. Well, I still sort of as an introduction. Don't misunderstand why I've come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I came to accomplish their purpose. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not even the smallest detail from God's law will disappear until its purpose is achieved. So if you ignore the least commandment and teach others to do the same, you will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But anyone who obeys God's laws and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. But I warn you, unless your righteousness, or unless your relationship with God and yourself and others and creation, unless that is better than that relationship that the Pharisees and the teachers of the religious law have, you will never enter into the kingdom of heaven. And the twin verses begin for Jesus' version of the twin verses. You have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder, or thou shalt not kill. Because this is going with the kill is going to be murder here. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I say that even if you are angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. Couple things here. This goes along with ahimsa, non-harming, non-killing, in both the Buddha and the yoga sense. It isn't just murder, as in you're killing these people in these certain contexts, because I can shoot you in my backyard for whatever reason, and it may be murder, but if we get out on the battlefield and I shoot you, they give me a medal, and I'm a hero, because for whatever reason. We have human beings have devised all these roles to decide when something is murder and then when it's not murder. And I remember when we were kids, we would always ask questions. Well, if thou shalt not kill, why do we kill animals for food? Why do we kill this? And people would always find a way to explain it around it. But as I've gotten older, I just decided, nope. What it originally meant when we were kids is what it means. Thou shalt not kill. And Jesus is saying, not only should thou shalt not kill, but thou shalt not entertain the sort of attitudes that lead to killing, which is anger. And what causes anger? Desire. You want something, you don't get it, you get angry. Someone is stopping you, forget what you think you want, you get angry. And that's, of course, you call them names, as it does here. So anger he equates with murder. So you behave in an unskillful way, right? You're not, anger goes against ahimsa. Anger is harming. It's harming you, but it's potentially harming other people as well. And then the last thing I'll say, where it says you'll be in dangers of hellfire. The word here in the Greek is Gehenna. And what Gehenna was, and I'm sure some of you know this, but what Gehenna was outside of Jerusalem, there was this big garbage pit. And it was always on fire. And it was called Gehenna. So Gehenna isn't like hell. Gehenna is this garbage pit that's always on fire. And that's the metaphor that Jesus uses. He's not saying that there is this fiery place called hell. I'm not saying there isn't either. Don't get me wrong. My opinion on that is my opinion on that, and I'm not going to trouble you with that. But I'm just saying that this is a metaphor. I like to translate it sort of the fiery garbage heap of hell, because that actually finds a way to capture both the way we often use the word, but also what he's saying. But he's basically, if you insult somebody, call someone an idiot, and curse somebody, you're in danger of the fiery garbage heap of hell. So the murder doesn't begin with the murder. It begins with the attitude. It begins with what's going on inside. So we need to look at what's going on inside to stop that from going outside. Or as someone who has had problems with alcohol in my past, I always like to tell people and tell myself that the drink isn't the relapse. The drink is the proof that the relapse has happened. That my attitude and my behaviors long before I pick up that drink is the relapse. And if I don't amend those somewhere along the way, it will take me to that drink. But if I can change that, the drink will never happen, right? And so, all right, here he's not talking about alcohol, but he's talking about murder. Well, the murder isn't the murder. The murder is the proof that the anger and the resentment and the name calling and that stuff has happened. So stop it from happening as it's happening. Stop it. Or as the Tao Te Ching says, the way to start a problem is when it's small, not when it gets big. Everything that is big started out small. The giant redwood that you can't even, well, he doesn't use redwood because he's in China, but I will translate as a giant redwood that you can't even put your arms around, or the giant oak that you can't even put your arms around, began as a tiny little nut or a tiny little acorn. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So the place to stop things is early, before they get out of control. And murder is out of control. So the way to stop it is when your behavior starts getting unskillful. Okay? I don't know if any of this is making sense. I'm just talking a lot and drinking tea. So Jesus continues, if you're presenting a sacrifice, they never read this in church and preach on this one. If you're presenting an offering, here it says sacrifice, but if you're ready to, even if you're putting your money in the collection plate, and you suddenly remember that you have someone, or that someone has something against you, leave that offering and go and be reconciled with the person, and then come back and make the offering. So he's saying your offerings don't count if you got all the stuff going on, right? Your sacrifice is BS if you got all the stuff going on. So if you're about ready to make the sacrifice, make the offering, put the money in your collection plate, and you remember, oh, so-and-so hates me because of this, take your envelope back, go make peace with so-and-so, and then come back and make your offering. Okay? Churches don't teach that one because they want your money. I'm sorry, that was probably unfair. But also probably true. cold tea. When you're on your way to the court with your adversary, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge, who will hand you over to the officer, who will be thrown into and you will be thrown into prison. And if that happens, you surely won't be free again until you have paid the last penny. So all this is about anger, reconciling with people, and this is going on with. I think you. Hopefully, you can see how this applies with, ahimsa, how it applies to the how it applies to. I don't have the page open anymore, but how it applies to some of the perfections. Let me see here if I can find it real fast. Uh, Loving kindness, equanimity, wisdom, renunciation, those sort of things. That this is a grand tradition that covers many, or these are ideas that are found in many traditions. So it isn't just about not killing people. It's about not being angry with people, not being resentful of people, not calling people names, not cursing people, not whispering curses about them. Like when somebody cuts you off in traffic, you say, "I hope you crash, you jerk. I hope you get pulled over by the cop, you jerk," or whatever. It's not about that either. It's not also not about. It's about reconciling with others, and it's about reconciling even if someone's suing you or you're suing them. Find a way to make peace before you get to the court, because you could lose the case, and then you may be thrown in jail yourself, and you're not getting out once you're in there, and you can't reconcile with anyone or anything while you're there. So it isn't just murder. Isn't just about murder. It's about all this other stuff that goes along with it, right? And that goes along with yoga, and that goes along with Buddha, and that goes along with Tao. So this is not sort of unique. And then we have here, you have heard the commandment, or in the old, what he really says, you have heard it said, you have heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery in his heart. So, and again, brahmacharya, it's sort of, you're losing the sight of the divine, and so now we're start looking at people as if they're objects for our own pleasure. So lust is when you make a person an object. Love is when you make an object a person, right? So instead of looking at someone as an object, you see them as a person or a thing. Like a dog may not be a person to you, it's a person to me, but it's its own living thing with its own worth that has value and worth just because it is, not because it can do something for me. But if I just see a beautiful woman, I'm like, oh, she can make me feel pleasurable. That's lust. I've reduced her from a person to a thing. So when you look at someone with lust in their heart, you've already committed adultery, which is, in this time, men couldn't commit adultery. It was only something that women could do. I know that's crazy, and don't get mad at me for telling you that. I'm not making up the rules. I'm just saying what the rules were. And so Jesus is saying something radical. You're saying that men can commit adultery too. I know that wrinkled people's brains at the time. Because adultery was basically women at this time, again, not condoning this, not saying this is how it should be, just saying that in the first century, this is how it was. Women were property. A woman's identity was only, it was linked to the man who basically owned her. So she was somebody's daughter until she was somebody's wife. And then hopefully she became somebody's mother. And by somebody, I mean a male child. And so her only security in society was there was a man who took care of her. So she was somebody's daughter, the father took care of her. She was somebody's wife, the husband took care of her. She was somebody's mother, the son took care of her after the father and the husband were gone. So that's the way it works. So adultery was sort of taking someone else's property, right? It was like one man coming in with another, but the woman committed adultery with another man. The man may have committed fornication, but the woman committed adultery. I know, it's crazy. I don't like it either, trust me. So I say anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery in his heart. So it isn't the act of adultery, it's the thing inside that leads to it. Again, it isn't the thing, it isn't the drink that's the relapse. The drink is the proof the relapse has happened. It isn't the adultery that's the thing. The adultery is the proof that the thing has been going on, and the thing is what's going on inside of you. So if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out. I don't think Jesus is being literal here. I think this is figurative, but he's making his point. This is poetry. Even if your good eye causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose a part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. So it's better you to be in heaven or saved without an eye than to have that eye and be in hell, right? And if your hand or even your stronger hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. You have heard that the law says a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce. But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery. Again, here's Jesus saying a man can commit adultery. What? Now, I want to say this, and I'm sorry because I know this video has already gone long, but I want to say this. If you made it this and step, I hope you scan ahead and you get to this point. Jesus' teaching about not getting divorced was not about the sanctity of marriage, and it's not about like I know like people who are like, I don't want to pick on any tradition, but there's one Christian tradition particularly that is like divorce is wrong, right? And I mean, none of them should probably like divorce in the sense of like, everyone just wait, get a divorce if you want one. I don't know. But there's one you're saying there's no reason to ever get a divorce again. If you get a divorce, then you can't have sacraments and things like that. And so there are a lot of women who were like in abusive relationships where their husbands were beating them and doing whatever, who went to the priest. Oops, I gave it away. Went to the priest and said, look, I need to get a divorce. I need to leave my husband. And the priests were like, no, you got to find a way to make it work. Marriage is important. You can't get a divorce. You can find a way to reform him, whatever it is. And they throw her back to this dangerous situation and in this abusive situation. And that's not what Jesus or anybody ever intended in this verse. What was going on was what I just said a second ago. A woman's security was based on the man who owned her. And again, I don't like saying it that way, but that's the way it was. So if a husband had a wife and he decided he didn't want this wife anymore and just divorced her, then she's out on the streets. She has, and if her father's, I mean, she may be able to go home if her father's still alive, but if the father's gone, the father may not take her back, by the way, because, she sold him to this guy, or he sold her to this guy. He may not take her back, but he may not be alive. So how does she survive? If she can only survive because she's somebody's daughter, somebody's husband, somebody's mother, if the husband gets rid of her, how does she survive? There isn't welfare, there isn't a social net, there isn't all this stuff to protect her. She is now out on the streets. So Jesus is saying you can't divorce someone. Where is it? I lost it. There it is. You can't just give a woman notice and divorce her and throw her out on the streets. You have to provide for her welfare. You have to make sure she's okay. You got to provide for her safety and her welfare. And if a man divorces his wife, unless the only reason is that she's been unfaithful, and anyone who marries a divorced woman, so there's also the sense that too, like, look, if I'm married, all I have to do is to get rid of my wife is just write a note saying I divorced my wife and now she's out on the streets. I'm married to this woman and I see this other woman and I like her and I want to be married to her, but I'm married to this one. Well, I'll just get rid of this one and marry her. And now, again, this plays into the lust. It plays into all this other stuff that we're talking about. I'm putting someone's life at risk because I selfishly want to now use this person to give me pleasure rather than serve the people I'm with, right? So this goes along with these yogic and Buddhist ideas as well that we mentioned before. The sexual misconduct, it's harming people. It's not practicing ahimsa. It's not practicing sexual. There's sexual misconduct. It's not honest. It's all this stuff going on. You have heard it. You have also heard that our ancestors were told, you must not break your vows. You must not carry out your vow. Oh, you must carry out your vow. Blah, 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 blah. You have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not break your vows. You must carry out the vows you make to the Lord. But I say, do not make any vows. Do not by heaven, because heaven is God's throne. Do not say by the earth, because the earth is his footstool. Do not say by Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is the city of the great king. Do not even say by my head, for you can't turn one hair white or one hair black. Just say simply, yes, I will, or no, I won't. Anything else from this is from the evil one. Or I would translate the evil one as the ego. Anything else is from the ego. And of course, it's you're making all these things, you may not be being honest. So again, it's along the principle of honesty, truthfulness. If I'm being truthful, I don't have to make vows. I'm just being truthful. Yes, I will. I will do this. I'm being truthful. You have heard the law that says punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. That's actually not what it says. It's basically saying they take the shirt, give them your pants or whatever. Stand there naked in court, because you had two garments. And if someone sues you for the outer garment, give them the inner garment too, and you're standing there butt naked, right? That's actually what he says. But anyway, someone sues you in court, give them your coat too. If the soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to those who ask. Don't turn away from those who want to borrow. So we have here ahimsa, non-violence, non-harming, even if someone harms you. Ahimsa. We have here generosity. If someone wants to borrow from you, give to them. Don't turn anybody away. And I'm sure I can find things for the other one too. So we have, again, Buddhist and yogic thought here in Jesus as well. And then the last one. You have heard the law says, love your neighbor and hate your enemies. But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In that way you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good. And he sends rain on the just as well as the unjust alike. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there in that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And I already mentioned this at the beginning. This is, I think, a teaching on equanimity, which is where you're treating everyone the same. So even your enemies, you treat them the same as you treat your friends. You pray for them. You find ways to do good things for them. Actually, in the Old Testament, it's around Exodus chapter 20. I don't know what verse. It's somewhere in there where it says, it's one of my favorite verses. It says, basically, if you're going down the road and you see your enemy and his donkey has collapsed under the burden of its load, you got to stop and help him out. I don't care if he's your enemy. You got to stop and help him out. If you can't do it for the enemy, do it for his donkey, right? You got to help him out. You got to help take the load off that donkey. So is that sort of equity? We treat our friends and our enemies alike. We have no enemies. We have no friends. We just have people that we are generous to, that we do not harm, and that we work for their good and the good of others. So anyway, I know it was a long, rambling, whatever. One of these days I'm going to have the sense of actually writing down what I'm going to say and not just do it off the top of my head, but I'm not that guy. That is not my samskara. My samskara is just, hey, I got this information, I'm going to throw it out there. Maybe some of it will make sense. Maybe some of it will stick. I don't know. But anyway, that's part 2 of the Yoga of Jesus, and how the Sermon on the Mount, hopefully you can begin to see, even though I may not have done it as skillfully as I would like, see how it coincides with, say, the 5 yamas of yoga and the 5 precepts of Buddha and the 10 perfections of Buddhism as well, and some other stuff as well. Okay? Big picture. We're thinking big picture. I'm not saying, and again, I'm not saying Jesus is somehow less because these other people teach this stuff. And I'm not saying you should stop following Jesus and start doing yoga or start following Buddha. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that for me, it helps to get a bigger picture of what's going on because, again, I think what Jesus is doing is Jesus is helping us, is teaching us how to experience the kingdom of God in our lives. He's not just, Jesus is not giving us a bunch of rules to follow. Jesus is not telling us, hey, don't do anything, just, believe in me, whatever that means, say a sinner's prayer, and I got you covered, and you can just keep on being a jerk. He's not saying that either. He's saying this is how you have an experience of the kingdom of God. And I would add, if you say that you're saved, this is what being saved looks like. And if you're not, and if your life and your behavior doesn't look this way, like if you look more like the adulterer and the murderer and the other people, then maybe you're not as saved as you think you are, right? And so that's it. These are sort of, I think, clues on we look at our lives to see how enlightened, how saved, how much of the kingdom of God is actually in us. Because it's in us. It's whether or not we remember and whether we find ways to bring it out of us that matter. So, again, the takeaways here, your natural state is being blessed. So be blessed. And if you remember and sort of accept that your blessedness and remember that and can find a way to abide in that, just sort of stop every once in a while and just remind yourself that you're blessed, then these qualities that Jesus talks about will begin to manifest in your life. The poor in spirit, the meekness, the hunger and thirst for righteousness, all that begins to come out. And yes, you may find that your friends and your family now think you're a little weird or crazy and may start picking on you. And of course, if that happens, great, because that's how they would have treated the prophets too. So you're in good company. And then, of course, we get to the dual verses of the like the Buddha had in his Dhammapada, the twin verses of "You have heard it said, but I'm telling you this." It's not the external action that's really the thing; it's the internal process that's leading to that. So let's look inside. Let's look at what's going on, what we're feeling, what we're thinking, and why we're feeling it and why we're thinking it. Let's look at that, and then it stops that behavior, right? So it's the inner process of being blessed, the inner process of what's going on inside that's affecting how we are going to live. Because remember, I will finish on this thought, and it's a thought from the Buddha, but it's a true thought. Remember that everything you are today, everything you are today is the product of past thoughts, because your past thoughts led to past feelings and past behaviors, and they have all created who you are right now. And everything you will be in the future is based on your present thoughts, because your present feelings, your present thoughts, your present actions will determine who you will become. And so this is what's going on here. Look at on the inside. Look at what you're feeling. Look at what you're thinking. Why am I feeling this? Why am I thinking this? Because if you can get your thoughts more in line with what Jesus is teaching here, or more in line with what the Buddha is teaching here, just like Jesus is teaching, or more in line with what yoga is teaching, just like Jesus is teaching this, about ahimsa, about truthfulness, about not stealing, about being generous, about persevering, about all these things, then your insides will become consistent. Your thoughts won't be all over the place. You will become more centered, more peaceful, and that will exude from you and also create a centered, peaceful life for yourself. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. And maybe it was all worth it for like the last 30 seconds of summing it up. All right. I should have just did the 30 seconds of summing up and we would have been done an hour and 18 minutes ago. All right. So anyway, thank you. I honor the divine within you and peace out.